Following Germany's invasion of Russia in June of 1941, the war against the Jews escalated in unimaginable ways. No longer satisfied with the restrictive and exclusionary policies against the German Jews, nor the isolation of the Polish Jews in the ghettos and slave labor camps awaiting deportation to some undetermined foreign location, the Nazis wanted a final solution to eliminate all Jews from Europe. The mass murder of the Jews began with the Einsatzgruppen, operational groups of soldiers and police officers who followed behind the regular army, rounded up Jews from the countryside, and then shot them in the back in front of mass graves. But Nazi administrators were not satisfied with this tactic, finding it to be too public, too inefficient, and too much of a burden on the soldiers and police officers assigned to complete it. They decided instead to go back to the T4 euthanasia program from the late 1930s. There, mentally and physically handicapped German citizens were sent to makeshift hospitals and killed by lethal gas. The final solution now called for the creation of death camps to kill all of the Jews of Europe. The first death camp became operational in December 1941, and additional camps were built during the spring of 1942. Eventually, 6 death camps were created, all in occupied Poland. The largest was Auschwitz-Birkenau. With the extermination of the Jews already underway, a conference was held in the Berlin suburb of Wannsee for the purpose of coordinating all of the government and military agencies impacted by the already approved decision to initiate the final solution. Camps were strategically built along the rail lines, and trains brought victims from all across Europe. The death camps were disguised as transit camps, and those selected were told that they were being relocated to the east. Upon arrival, they were stripped of their clothing and told to take showers. But these hid the gas chambers hidden within. At first, those selected included only those considered unfit for work. This included the very young and their mothers, the very old, the sick, and the disabled. Most of the victims were killed within 2 hours of arrival. Carbon monoxide was the gas that was most typically used at the camps, but at Auschwitz-Birkenau they used a rat poison called Zyklon B. The personal possessions of the victims were sorted, bundled, and returned to Germany, with the profits used to fund the camps themselves. Disposal of the bodies was the most time-consuming task. At first, the victims were buried, but later crematoria were built and the remains were burned. Resistance at the death camps took the form of the able-bodied workers who had been assigned to herd the victims into the gas chambers and remove the bodies afterwards, rebelling as they came to realize that they soon too would be killed. Escape attempts and riots typically resulted in the death of all of the resistors, with only a very small handful successfully escaping and surviving the war. When most of the Jews of Eastern Europe had been killed, those camps were dismantled, but there were still Jews living in Western Europe, including France, Germany, and Hungary, who continued to be sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau until liberated by the Russians in January of 1945. The death camps were responsible for 50% of all the deaths that occurred during the Holocaust. 25%, or 1.5 million, were killed by the Einsatzgruppen, and the remaining 25% were worked to death or killed by the systematic abuse, starvation, and disease that occurred at tens of thousands of other concentration and slave labor camps across the entire German Reich. The victims of the death camps included not only Jews, but also the Sinti Roma, otherwise called the Gypsies, Russian prisoners of war, Jehovah's Witnesses, Polish citizens, homosexuals, and other so-called undesirables. It is now estimated that as many as 17 million were killed by the Nazis, which included 6 million Jews, of which 1.5 million were children.